6-inch safety margin. I'm not strict on that. Basically, I'll grab that piece of wood that I just threw over here. Basically, the rule of thumb, how you hold the wood when you line up your cut. Say I want to cut something off and I drew my line on top of the board. You'd line it up by touching the wood to whatever line you make. Your fingers need to stay away from the trigger. We have a safety button just to be even more safe. Keep your fingers away from the trigger because you're not expecting to turn it on. You line up your cut. While you line up your cut, your left hand needs to be in place. Your left hand, I go fingers on top, my thumb against the edge, putting pressure towards the fence. My fingers keeping pressure down on the table. Make sure your left hand's in place because if you line it up perfectly and then move your left hand, when you go to set it back in, you can possibly move it again. So what you do, my rule of thumb, so you know how far away to keep your fingers, I keep them at the very edge of the fence. That way they're plenty far away, not to get cut. If you have your fingers out here, you're not really controlling the wood as good as you need to be. Your hand should be on the very edge of the fence. Make sure your hand is not close to the blade. Before you start the saw, you need to make sure that your hand is as far away as you can get it, as close to the end of the fence as you can get it. Then basically, with this saw, we have a safety button. It's this button right here. You have to push that in with your thumb first, then you pull on the trigger with your fingers. I'll plug it back in for you. We unplugged it to use a router. A side note, depending on if you have a lot of stuff to use, we only have one plug per table, so you just kind of got to make do. And this one happens to have to plug into this one all the time. But, like I said, the safety button gets pushed in with your thumb first. Once you've had your cut lined up, then you wrap your fingers around and pull the trigger like you would any of the other machines. Pull it, but you have to wait for it to gain full speed. That's just, you just listen to it. You'll hear it'll start really high pitched. This machine's really loud. It'll be really high pitched, but then it'll kind of level out and it'll be the same tone for a little while. That's all you kind of got to listen to for it to know it's at full speed. Don't push the button, pull the trigger, and put it down in the same motion. You have to go slow with the saws, mainly because the teeth are designed to cut a certain amount of wood out at a certain speed. If you go faster than what the teeth can handle, it's just going to make a bad cut or it's going to have something get thrown. That's why you have to go somewhat slow with it. But basically, you line up your cut, you come all the way back up with it. Don't ever start any of the saws when they're actually touching the wood. Make sure you start it all the way back at its original spot. Push the safety button in with your thumb, wrap your fingers around the trigger, then you hit this again full speed, then you come all the way down. Go all the way down until you can't go any farther. Then I prefer to stop the machine down here and then come up. Some people do it differently where they come up and then stop the machine. I think that with people that are less experienced with the saw, it helps not make a mistake with the cut you just made. It won't screw up the perfect cut you just made. So that's pretty much it with that. Just remember, before you start, double check that your hands are not going to be in the path of the saw. Especially if you tilt it. If you guys need angles, there is a gauge down here. All you have to do is spin this to loosen it, and make sure you tighten it back up, and you can spin this to cut an angle. You can go 52 degrees to the right, you can go 45 degrees to the left. But, especially if you are going to do that, you might have to have your hands on a different side, depending. Make sure before you make any cuts, you just check that your hands are away from the saw. And if you're doing a lot of crazy angles, don't necessarily trust this gauge if it has to be perfectly accurate. Grab one of the L squares or grab a square and check it with the blade. But that's a little bit more technical than you probably need to get into.